Hello, hello. Today we have our matchup graph video for the week 11 now. Well over halfway into the season, getting close to the playoffs. So these games are more important than ever. But let's start off with our matchup cards for wide receiver this week with DK Metcalf. So we got the adjusted defensive rank versus receivers. How good is that fantasy matchup compared to the average with the schedule included? Their alignment. So DK Metcalf 90% of the time is on the outside. So just isolating that, Cincinnati actually 10th best compared to being 17th. Part of that because DJ Turner is going to be shadowing DK Metcalf, meaning he's going to be following him snap to snap around the field like he did in week 7, I think. Yeah, week 7 when they played against each other, where he only had 3 catches and 50 yards. Then we got that secondary DB right now leaving it empty because Turner is shadowing DK Metcalf. But that explosive pass plays, the opponent pace of play, team total, all incredible for DK Metcalf. The Bengals allow a ton of explosive plays, which is huge for Metcalf. That is like what he needs to pay off this matchup, I would say. That opponent pace, the Bengals offense plays super fast, which is good for the opposing fantasy guys on the Steelers. Team total, they're projected to score 28 points. Bengals defense is the worst on the century, basically. And that spread, Pittsburgh favored by 5.5 this game, which usually doesn't help receivers. So overall, it is a B matchup grade because DJ Turner makes this a lot harder and makes it more of that average matchup than you would expect with the Bengals. But at the same time, the Bengals allow a lot of points. So when the Steelers are projected to score 28, they allow a lot of those big plays. Metcalf can pay it off in one play. The last time they played, he had that 39-yard catch to start the game, I think on that opening drive. In the rest of the game, 4 targets, 2 catches for 11 yards. So it's a shutdown. So I actually like Calvin Austin as a flyer in one of the deep leagues. Pat Freiermuth, same thing at tight end, where Cincinnati's dead last against tight ends. They're really bad against slot receivers in general. So everybody else set up pretty well. Metcalf, a little harder matchup, but he can still get there just because of that explosive playability. Next up, we're going to go to Quentin Johnston. He has the best matchup of the Chargers receivers. Keenan Allen kind of worrying me lately with the pressure. Doesn't really help him. Doesn't get those screens, like he's not that screen receiver. Johnston surprisingly was over Ladd McConkey last week, and it was by a lot. He had 6 targets at or behind the line of scrimmage. McConkey had none. So Johnston can benefit from that. And when we're looking again at that alignment, the Jacksonville, they're actually not horrible in pass defense. A lot of it is the game script type stuff. And in general, against tight ends, they're better, but the receivers not as much. So they're 20th against receivers, but against those outside receivers, 31st. Some of that is injuries. Greg Newsome comes in at corner. Hasn't been the greatest. So Quentin Johnston will get him about 60% of the time. That favors him a lot. So explosive passes haven't really been there against Jacksonville. The other stuff isn't perfect, but Quentin Johnston definitely has the best matchup of those 3 Chargers receivers. So I don't mind him at all this week. I wanted to show Odunze again this week because recently he's been more predictable with his matchups, even though it's been extreme. So trying to predict it. A couple weeks ago as the Bengals, it was that DK Metcalf matchup. DJ Turner, shut him down, 0 points. Then, probably when everybody benched him, plays the Giants last week. It was incredible for him against that heavy man coverage defense. Is what's Odunze been by far best at compared to playing against zone coverage, and he had a great day. So now Minnesota, they play not as much man coverage, and the history's been a little murky. He's gotten the volume in the past, but consistently hasn't been producing. Week 1 had that touchdown, so it was a good day at the end of it, but still under 40 yards. Last year when they played, 7-target game, 10-target game. It was 9 targets in week 1. Still under 40 yards in all 3 games against Minnesota. So they pressured the quarterback a lot. Caleb Williams has been pretty solid against them throughout his career. Nothing bad. So they're 8th against receivers right now. There's some positives here, but a lot of it will come down to just can he get into the end zone. So I don't think it'll be a horrible day for Odunze. You're hoping not, when 3 of the last 4 this month have been, or 3 of the last 5 now, have been those horrible floor games. I think it's more middle of the road and it's dependent. Does he get into the end zone? Wan'Dale Robinson's an interesting one with Jameis Winston coming in. Does he get the volume and does he get those downfield targets? Because you'd think like, oh, Darius Slayton, that downfield guy, he'll have his shots for sure. And it's not a bad matchup for Slayton. But when we're actually looking at Robinson out of the slot, 71% of his routes are out of the slot. He actually has more downfield targets than Darius Slayton. Not because that percentage is the same, but because he gets so many more targets. He has 2 times as many in general. So when we're looking at just those targets of 15 plus yards downfield, even though he's playing out of the slot a bunch, he still has more than Slayton. So I think he's definitely that number one guy in this Giants passing game, although the matchup isn't perfect. Green Bay is definitely best against the slot. Like you see, they're 19th against receivers, but when we're talking just the slot, which Robinson plays one of the highest percentages in the NFL out of the inside, fifth best. So that's not ideal. And again, it sucks that Jameis Winston's first game is against Green Bay. He was number one in stopping the explosive pass plays. But I think the volume is there, which is a lot of the times when we're talking Wan'Dale Robinson, especially PPR leagues, like you're hoping for those 10 target games like we saw last week, like we saw in like 3 out of the last 4 games, I think. So that spread being big time underdogs, that definitely helps. I think in PPR leagues, he's pretty solid. Jameis, compared to the Giants' passing attack this year, 27% better for receivers in terms of providing fantasy points to them. PPR points, catches, receiving yards, touchdowns, all that. 27% better when he's been a starter the last few years compared to what the Giants have had so far. Next up, a good matchup. T. Higgins, one that we have seen before. And now there's an interesting spot where Darius Slay might miss this game too, which could make it even better. That primary DB, about 50% of the time, it'll be Joey Porter Jr., which still has been playing well, even though receivers and against the outside, bottom 3 in the NFL, Pittsburgh this year. And we saw that when they played earlier. He had 10 targets, 6 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown the last time they played. Darius Slay being out could make that even better. Really good spot here overall. Everything kind of favors them when they're playing at a super high pace, very pass heavy. That spread, like obviously their defense is helping them out. So whenever you get these guys in good matchups where the offense is still going to be scoring a decent amount, like they're not playing the Titans, it should work out for Higgins. He's going to have a lot of downfield opportunities, can pay it off in one play, very similar to DK Metcalf on the opposite side. So still really like T. Higgins again in this matchup. Those outside receivers this season, plus 6.3 points per game, better than their average when they play against Pittsburgh. So just taking T. Higgins' average, don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm guessing Higgins is averaging like 14 points per game. So you'd expect him to score 20 against Pittsburgh. So hopefully that happens, hopefully. And lastly, opposite of Higgins, someone that's been extremely disappointing recently and will probably disappoint again, is Courtland Sutton. It's an interesting matchup this week. McDuffie, with the injuries, actually projected to play more inside like he kind of did back in the day. That helps Courtland Sutton because he is that primary outside receiver, like X receiver, doesn't play inside too much like Troy Franklin does and Pat Bryant do. He's going to be on the outside. Still not the greatest matchup in the world. It's not bad. But then also the coverage schemes for Kansas City, they are number 1 in the NFL in man coverage. So they don't play it a ton, which doesn't help the Broncos anyways. And then when they do play man coverage, they are the best in the NFL at it. And I bring that up specifically because Courtland Sutton, that's where a ton of his production comes against with Troy Franklin too. So Franklin also not set up the greatest, not the greatest matchup for Bo Nix either. So Sutton, a lot of his points is getting those targets against man coverage and those big time plays. When he's going against zone, doesn't play against. So whether, no matter what they're in, it doesn't really match up well for Sutton. So I'm not even confident with McDuffie playing inside just because there's so many other factors that make it a negative. At quarterback, one negative to point out real quick with Herbert, but then besides that, it's positive. So he's only a B+, even though Jacksonville's 26 against quarterbacks, mainly because I'm not super confident in Jacksonville's offense against a really good Chargers defense, because a lot of the reason that they're 26 against fantasy quarterbacks doesn't reflect in their actual passing defense. They are top 10 in EPA per pass this year. It is more that game script stuff, more other things in terms of what matters in fantasy compared to the NFL. So as a passing defense and whole, they're not the worst, but besides that, they don't really pressure the quarterback too much, which is important for Herbert. 7th lowest in terms of that pressure rate. And then also when we're looking at the rushing quarterbacks, they're 32nd. Herbert's been rushing more this year. 5 attempts in 4 straight games, over 5 attempts, 5 or more in 4 straight games. So overall, he's set up pretty well in this spot. If they can protect him, he can take off and run some. And if this game is close, or as long as they're not blowing out Jacksonville, can be taken advantage of overall with this defense. Brock Purdy, coming back off of injury, makes it an exciting one with Ricky Pearsall possibly coming back versus Arizona. He's played 2 games this year. He had 19 points and he had 20 points. So near quarterback one, fringe quarterback one in both of those games. I will say Arizona, 9th in passing, 25th against rushing quarterbacks. I don't expect Purdy to run too much, especially off this injury. He's had 7 attempts in his 2 games, so rushing was a big part of his fantasy production last year, surprisingly. You wouldn't think that because the couple years prior to that, it wasn't. But last year, the reason he was so good was because he averaged like over 4 rushing fantasy points per game. The first 2 games, he had like 10 yards in each game. So the confidence there isn't as great, but they don't pressure the quarterback too much. That helps. Does Brissett on the opposite side keep up with this? How does this Chargers offense or this Cardinals offense look? No Marv there. So there's lots of questions there. It's not the worst matchup in the world, but Purdy off of injury doesn't make me super confident unless it's a super flex league. The talk of the town this week with J.K. Dobbins injured, it's finally R.J. Harvey time. Maybe, hopefully. Sean Payton was saying that he's going to give him a lot of work. I believe it just because the role this year, Dobbins hasn't been the rushing running back in the red zone back and Harvey just coming in receiving. Harvey has gotten a ton of red zone work and a decent amount of carry still. In terms of their rushing production, fantasy points per carry, the exact same as Dobbins. And then you kind of add in that receiving. So Bidet will maybe take some of that receiving, which could be annoying. That's the main worry here because Kansas City's rushing defense is so good. But this is just going to be dependent on Harvey getting this volume. If Harvey gets 12 to 15 touches in this game, I'm not the most confident. It's not the worst offensive line versus defensive line, like run matchup that's set up pretty well, but still really good run defense. I think in terms of him being a good RB2, RB1 potential this week, like it's going to take 20 touches. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but I'm not super confident in Harvey's first game. He has a week 12 bye next week, and then 2 great matchups, and then the fantasy playoffs kind of suck. Next up, let's go Kimani Vidal, sticking the third Chargers guy in this video. And another interesting one, Jacksonville has been really good in terms of that rushing fantasy production up until last week. So last week, against a Houston offense, you wouldn't really expect them to be the greatest on the ground. The first time they've allowed 100 rushing yards to running backs on the entire season. And in terms of the rushing touchdowns, they also allowed one last week, but they've only allowed a rushing touchdown to running back in 2 out of their 9 games, Jacksonville. They haven't been good against receiving backs. That's kind of been a trend. And that's what shocked me the most was I didn't even realize until I looked up Vidal's game log. He hasn't been getting the targets much at all. Less than Hampton, by far less than Hampton. But Vidal, like we think of him as like that receiving running back, 2 targets, 1 target, 1 target the last 3 games. So if he doesn't get that receiving work, that does scare me. Part of that is because of the pressure at the quarterback position and those screens aren't really going to Vidal as much. I think he had that. I think that was his 1 target last time, which is a quick screen. So don't love it in terms of the receiving because the matchup is really good, but the volume isn't there. So hopefully he can kind of replicate what Woody Marks did last week, but it's not the greatest matchup in the world, which kind of surprised me. Quinshon Judkins here against Baltimore. The big thing here is I would say the C grade doesn't really match up with the numbers you see on the screen because 21st against running backs, usually pretty good. 27th against receiving running backs, that's obviously great. At home, there's some red in there from the other things, but that's not as much matchup based as it is just the Browns offense. But the main thing here, the Ravens defense is not the Ravens defense of the first 6 weeks. First 6 weeks, they were dead last in scoring defense. Then they had their bye week. Since that bye week, 4 weeks ago, second best defense in terms of scoring. They have been so much better. Part of that is moving Kyle Hamilton around. A lot of different factors that they changed around, and it's just looking a lot better. So Judkins, when he's playing teams that maybe blow out the Browns or controlling the game, all that sort of stuff, that rushing volume isn't really there as much. The receiving volume is never really there. So that doesn't matter as much. That rushing defense has been way better. And then we're just looking like they're projected to score 16 points. They're over touchdown underdogs. Baltimore plays a very slow and controlled game. So I don't love it for Judkins this week. I'm not super confident. I think there is a very high chance we see another floor game like we've kind of seen in like 3 out of the last 5 games, I believe, where he's been under or been in single digits, but 2 of those he scored like under 4 fantasy points. So that makes it really tough. So I don't love Quinshon in this spot against Baltimore, even though your matchups will say, oh, this is a good spot when we're just looking at Baltimore versus running backs this season. Woody Marks, we were just talking about him with torching that Jacksonville defense. Now he gets Tennessee. We have seen this before, and I say that in 2 different ways. We've seen this before versus Tennessee, where he dominated. We've also seen this before where after that Tennessee game, after a game he played really well, he had a goose egg. It's a little less predictable with Woody Marks in this backfield, but I will say it looks better this time with that usage than last time. Last time, Chubb still got a decent amount of work, but Woody Marks was just so much better, so it was more just like predicting like, hey, maybe Marks can get 70% of those running back touches versus a Baltimore defense, which at the time was 32nd. He didn't. It was under 50%. This time, the week before, he did have 70% of the running back touches. His career high. Chubb had 5 carries on 13 snaps. Basically did nothing. Woody Marks had all the receiving. He had all the rushing for the most part, and the production was there. And now he gets that Tennessee matchup again, which he had 28 points against last time. 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 through the air, 1 on the ground against a Tennessee defense. And as again, they're set up pretty well for Texans. One of the worries is similar to Quinshon Judkins. The Texans offense is just not very good. That defense is incredible. So when you get a Texans defense against Tennessee, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities here for Woody Marks. And if he can get 70% of the running back touches in this matchup, then he would be an RB2. So I like it for Woody Marks again overall, a matchup in general. When we're moving to James Cook, Cook has been up and down, and it's been very predictable in terms of when they win games, he does good. When they don't, he doesn't. The game script, again, I think is going to be the difference here because the matchup, Tampa Bay is really good on the ground. They're not the greatest against receiving backs, but similar to Judkins, some of the other guys on this list, Dobbins I was talking about, that doesn't really matter for him. James Cook, it matters what is happening on the ground and if they control this game. So they're only 2.5-point favorites. That kind of surprised me. They're at home. That's a big part of it. Can they control this game against Tampa Bay? I trust in their defense. I don't think the Tampa Bay offense matches up the greatest against the Bills defense just because their secondary is so much better than their running defense. So I think it's going to be more relying on Rachaad White and Sean Tucker to have good games. And I trust James Cook, if they can control this offense, control this game, come out with a victory, he'll be a big part of that. Get enough rushing volume against this defense. I look at like Trayvon Henderson last week, had a very similar matchup. Not the greatest rushing matchup, but still had a couple of those explosive plays and broke away. I wouldn't be shocked if James Cook had a very similar day. Obviously has that floor potential, but I don't think you're ever sitting James Cook unless you have an amazing team. And even on an amazing team, I'd be fine with playing James Cook this week. And I can't leave without talking about one tight end. We're going Jake Ferguson, one of my favorite players in fantasy. It's been rough recently with CeeDee Lamb back because they play similar roles in a way. He is more dependent on Dak in this Cowboys passing attack having a good day in general. Then he'll benefit just because he gets the volume as that third option. But CeeDee Lamb definitely takes a lot of those short targets compared to George Pickens, which Ferguson was taking basically all of that without CeeDee Lamb on the field. So this matchup in general, the Raiders have allowed third fewest receptions to tight ends. But when we're looking at the opposite side, because the Cowboys defense, we love them in fantasy, thank you, the Raiders offense are projected 24 points this week against the Cowboys. So hopefully that can help Ferguson balance out that third best against receptions to tight ends. Give Ferguson some more volume there if they can stay pass heavy against this defense, which isn't the greatest secondary in the world. They're not bad, but I wouldn't say they're 7th best. So Ferguson still would say he's like that low-end tight end 1 this week. Would start him above a lot of guys, not above any of the elite tight end options, though. So solid matchup in general, but not the greatest in the world. If you got any questions, we'd love to answer them in the comments. Any matchup-specific ones, whatever it is, I can try to help out there. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon.